Hi, everybody.
Please take your seats. Thank you.
Yes. Here we go. You know, it's hard to believe it's almost over. It's been, a grand time we've been having with lots of variety, I would say. And we just want to acknowledge that there's some of us up here on the stage who are more familiar to you. But as you can imagine, it is behind the scenes where the sausage really gets made. I mean, you won't find anyone who is more dedicated or more nimble than all those members of our staff. They are the engine that makes this thing run. Thank you. I mean, would you even know that the sprinklers on the field went off at 3:30 a.m. on the opening day and soaked all the lunch tables and the tablecloths? Or that 21 writers were in travel mode when that global tech problem hit? Or that we'd never before had to Zoom something into the Opera House. But that's what this group does. And I beg them all the time to come out on the stage on the last day so we can clap for you. And they tell me to go look it up under fat chance in the dictionary. Thank you for that round of applause. We want to show them our gratitude, and to the 100 volunteers who were spread out across this campus. Bravo, bravo. Yeah, it's wonderful. So, not just on behalf of all of us, but on behalf of the presenters, we thank you for being the absolutely best audience in the country. Come back. Come back.
You are the best audience in the country. We want to thank also the writers who give so much of themselves here. They have the best time, but they also spend a lot of time really thinking about what they're doing and to whom they're speaking. These are turbulent times, crazy times, there's no question, but we hope that these few days for you, for all of us, act as an inspiration, a source of energy as we go forward, and we're already looking forward to next year. But before that, we have here to introduce the beloved Anne Lamott. We have Ellen McCourt to introduce her. Ellen is a dear, dear friend of this conference. Of course, she and Frank came the second year of this conference. We loved Frank so much. He was a member of our family, and Ellen is too. Here she is. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Well, good evening, all. Here we are at the last session. A big sigh, and prepare yourself for a little self-care now, a little self-love. So, there's a particular origin story that Frank and Anne Lamott have. Now, I hate to contradict John, but Frank actually first came here in 1998. And it was 2 years after Angela's Ashes was published. By that time, Anne Lamott was already a regular. And you may have been here at Annie's breakout session. I think many of you were, because you're probably wildly enthusiastic fans. And Anne had written Bird by Bird in 1994. And who was one of her most avid readers but Frank, before he wrote Angela's Ashes. And he got that book, and he underlined passages like a schoolboy because he loved it, and he was using it in the way that Anne had intended. So, he was very excited to meet her. He loved her style, and he loved her ability to connect with her readers on a visceral level. He also shared her belief that the essence of writing is to write about something simple, something immutable, about being human. So it's no surprise that one of the quotes Frank underlined in Bird by Bird was one by Flannery O'Connor. Quote, "Anyone who survived childhood has enough material to write for the rest of his or her life. Maybe your childhood was grim and horrible, but grim and horrible is okay if it's well done." So in essence, with Bird by Bird, Anne gave Frank permission to write about his miserable childhood. He loved her willingness to let it all hang out, to write her life, her addictions, her fears, and her innermost musings. The result? A series of searingly honest, nakedly personal, quirky memoirs and novels. 20 in all. In fact, she's published a book every 2 or 3 years since 1979, beginning with Hard Laughter and bringing us to her current meditation on love, Somehow. Anne's seemingly off-kilter take on life and the world can be summed up in a comment about what she calls one of the 12 truths about life. And I quote, "It's filled simultaneously with heartbreaking sweetness and beauty, desperate poverty, floods and babies and acne and Mozart, all swirled together." And then she says, "I don't think it's an ideal system." So she understands the contradictions, the unfairness, the pain, joy, and absurdity of life. And most important, she just gets on with it. The other aspect is that she has a profound awe, deep reverence, and a source of spiritual revelation when she talks about writing. She also thinks you can remember everything that is true and beautiful in life in a 10-minute walk. Now, there was a lot of discussion about perfectionism a couple of days ago at the breakout session. And Anne is very clear about perfectionism. She thinks it is the voice of the oppressor. She thinks it will keep you cramped and insane your whole life. And it is the main obstacle between you and what she calls, and what you heard, is a shitty first draft. So this translates into Frank's concept of scribbling. You sit down every day, you just scribble. It doesn't even have to be coherent. You make lists, you write names, you write phrases, addresses, you write anything that comes into your mind, but above all, write. So when you're passionate about it, as Anne is, you produce an enviable catalog of books and amass a near cult-like following. And I count myself among the faithful, and so should you. Here she is, Anne Lamott. Welcome.
You did a great job. You should stay out here with me. Thank you, Ellen. I loved Frank so much, as everybody who ever met him did. And thank you, Sun Valley Writing Conference, from the bottom of my heart. What an honor to be asked to give this talk in Frank's name. I feel like you made a really big mistake, and I am glad. This place and conference mean more to me than I can probably capture in words. I raised my son here. Ethan Kanan lured me into Reva's dark web rather easily, as I remember, with a description of how great she and Sun Valley were. And like everyone else, I fell in love with Reva and Bill, her husband, and Robin and Marianne Dolan and Ann Taylor Fleming, and Ethan and I taught workshops for the first 3 years. And was anybody here at those workshops? It was kind of wonderful and primitive. And then we were at the school, at the John Massack's and Leslie School. And my strongest memory of those workshops, we have like 30 students each, was that I think the first year there was this chuck wagon that went up into the hills. I mean, at those first few years, remember Massack's, they had folk singers here. We'd gather around and we'd sing, Simon and Garfunkel and stuff. But there was a chuck wagon and up in the hills, and one of Ethan's students was Mackenzie Bezos. What's his name's first name? I mean, first wife, Mark. Is it Mark? Right. So Mackenzie was there, and Jeff came to the chuck wagon. Sam was 6 and very shy, and I immediately started pushing him over to Jeff Bezos, and I said, go talk to Uncle Jeff, and maybe cuddle with him, get his number. And all of our families, the Canaans, Barb and Ethan had an infant, Ami here. The first year we were here, I think, it was the Mathesons and the Halberstams and the Merwins and the McCourts. And we used to all stay out at the Tuleys had a lease on a property out at a place called Lake Pettit. And we'd all stay there in little cabins for a few days after the conference. And for the first 5 years or so, Sam had no idea that these were the legends, of the American canon. He just thought there were these garrulous old guys around the campfire drinking what he didn't know was extremely expensive wine, But Sam would always build forts around off to the side of the campfire, and so there'd be these garrulous, erudite, extremely competitive conversations going on with these legends. And then you'd look over and you'd see Frank McCourt sitting in the dirt in one of Sam's forts. They were always called Sam's fort. And Frank would be sitting over there in the dirt with Sam, and they'd be making structures out of twigs, and they'd weave together pine needles to make the roofs. And it was just so lovely. I don't think Sam could understand much of what Frank said with that accent, but they were both such sweethearts. It didn't matter. But the most important relationship for him, really by far, was Reva's husband, Bill Tuley. Our first year was the summer that Sam's grandfather passed, and Bill was just didn't have any grandkids yet, and Sam went up to him. Oh, it was just the bravest thing he'd ever done, and he sort of tugged on his sleeve, and he said, "Bill, my granddad died, and I wonder if you could be my granddad now." And of course Bill said yes, and he was. They went fishing for trout hundreds of times over the years in both L.A. and Marin. Although I'm not positive they ever caught one single trout. Of course, that wasn't the point. Love was. Because love is always the point. And one year I insisted that Reva and Robin include my really, really awful boyfriend of the time, who was a well-known, if really overrated writer. I'm not going to name names, but I'll tell you later. And this guy behaved boorishly, and we split up right here, and he rode home in Stephen King's private plane with Stephen King. And I was out at Pettit with Matheson and Merwin and Frank McCourt and Paula Merwin and I was just this horrible, snotty mess as this private plane flew off. And but the guys, they promised to avenge me. It was like something from the Game of Thrones, you know. And Merwin, W.S. Merwin, possibly the most gentle man I've ever known, proclaimed, "He is our enemy now, Annie." W.S. Merwin. And Marianne Dolan took off the ring she was wearing, which was silver and had a beautiful sea glass stone on it, and she put it on my finger. I gave her one too later, but she said, "You're going to get through this. We're right here." And that's what Sun Valley has been like. So obviously I got the better deal. And just a couple quick more things. I wish you could have all known Anne Taylor Fleming's wonderful lunk of a husband, a beautiful, well-known writer named Carl Fleming, who had really made a name for himself writing about the civil rights era, been savagely beaten up, and just told the truth of it. And he was a good speaker and a really good interviewer because he was a good listener, but he'd always freeze up before he was supposed to go on. He was very sensitive, and he'd sort of fall apart. And so I would be sent for. Anne called me the Carl Whisperer, and Carl and I would huddle together, and we'd say the Serenity Prayer, and then I'd sort of push him out onto the stage like a parent would push their kid out onto the ice skating rink, you know, and he'd always nail it. And then one year, during one of the worst years of this famine in the Sudan, with Reva's blessing, I passed the hat. And we raised, with the participants and the presenters and the volunteers, we raised close to $8,000. And wait, this is amazing. They had a very dear friend named George Russell, who was a great friend of the early days of the conference, and he came up to me, and he lived in San Francisco too, and he said, "When you get home, call me." I gave me his number. He said, "I'll match whatever you collect here." And I said, "George, it's like already $8,000. He said, "That's okay." And so the Sun Valley Writers Conference that year sent off $16,000 to Doctors Without Borders. So one last thing. Amy Tan and her husband Lou were here for Sam's 7th birthday. And you know a kid does not want to be with a bunch of old people. I mean, no offense. On your birthday, you want to be home with the kids. And he was here. But one day, there was a knock on the door, and Amy Tan and her husband Lou came by. And Lou had bought this very expensive, elaborate Lego structure that we could have never afforded, and he immediately got down on the floor with Sam, and they took out all the parts and started reading the instructions, and I was like, oh my God. And I said to Lou, would it be okay if I took a really short walk right now? And without looking up, he said, go ahead, take a nice long walk. And so those are the people and the memories that I brought with me this year, having not been here for a long time. And I am flooded with love and moved beyond words by what this place has given to me and to my little boy. So thank you. So I've arranged to... Thank you. So I want to talk about reading and great writing and reasons to live tonight. Maybe also dipping briefly into the meaning of life. And I titled this talk Paper Ships, because there was this little tiny bookstore the next town over called Paper Ships, because it seemed like the most perfect metaphor for books that you could ever come up with, and from these small, flat, rigid sheets of paper unfold world after world after world, ancient and future and tomorrow and right this minute, worlds that sing to you and comfort you or excite you or center you or transport you or shake you out of your complacency. We climb onto a gangway when we open a book. and we get lost for a few hours, and that is how we get found. People of our ilk, readers and writers. Books help us understand who we are and how to live in the face of our mortality, our own dark chaos and the world's dark chaos, and too many unsurvivable losses, and so much blessing that it can be sort of scary. And they show us what community and friendship mean. They show us how to live and die and survive any bleak shit that the world might throw at us. Again, I'm not going to name names. I'm guessing many of your lives were defined to a great degree by the love of reading. And that if you were anything like me as a child, it was in chapter books that you found safety and direction and company. I arrived on the earth way, way more anxious than the average bear. And was that me? Sorry, excuse me. And to survive that shyness and sensitivity, I taught myself to read chapter books by about 5 years old, which I know some of you did too. And in the extended, ongoing story of a chapter book, the immersion into the lives of these humans and animals and funny space aliens, we found a mirror. And we were given the greatest gift, one of the greatest gifts that life has given us, which is a sense of connection and of belonging. And at the same time, it taught us how unique we are and how beautiful that is, which the culture doesn't say. The culture says, look this way and try to be more like this and don't do that at all. And the books show us these unique, these wild, unique people. And in them, we learn how wonderful it is that we're unique. That even identical twins do not have matching fingerprints. You know, and that we learn that some people in these pages and on these paper ships figured out a way to be who they really were, who they were born to be, who they get to be going forward, and that they don't have to be the person that they agreed to be at 4 and 5 and 6, and who they signed the contract that they would always do well, that they would always thrive, that they would always succeed. I mean, I was 35. I had a baby at 35, and I was 35 before anyone mentioned that a B+ was a good grade. I'm not making that up. I thought, not really, you know. In our family, if you brought home a B+, there was, you had to have a conference with Dad and a study. Was there still time to bring it up to an A-? But then if you did, you know, then was there still time in the quarter to get, you know? You could not win. It was a losing battle. And in books, in literature, there were people who had stepped out of what they had agreed to and floundered and flailed and kept on going for the great prize of being who they are and being fully alive here on this earth. So, you know, when you're a kid, God, you could pick up the same book over and over and over again for maybe a whole week. You know, it could be Beezus and Ramona or Stuart Little or the Swiss Family Robinson. And these people were the gateway drug to Vonnegut and Doris Lessing and Tolstoy. And this is where I first found salvation, like people find it in Jesus or Buddha or Islam. And it was protection from the world, and it was comfort, and it was that rare excitement. And I know you all know what I'm talking about, where you go, God, you look up from the page, and you say, God. And it's exactly where I'll find it tonight when I crawl back into bed after dinner. And books are why I've ultimately never, no matter what, lost hope. So my family was atheist, but the library was our church. Jazz records were our sacred music. Paintings were our stained glass. My family went to the local library every single Thursday night. It was family night in this tiny town where I grew up. And the 5 of us would stock up on books to last us the whole week. And sometimes my parents would leave me behind with the librarian, who was a very, very dear family friend named Betty McKegney. And as a little girl, I'd get to check books in and out. You know, remember those stamps? You have this back in 2 weeks. You know, you be sincere. And I'd help people find what they were looking for in those really tiny Beatrix Potter library drawers of the 50s, you know. My parents and librarians along the way taught me to wander the aisles slowly, for the books were so many juicy moments of life and spirit and friendship could be found. You found Treasure Island, you found E.B. White and Pippi Longstockings, and you might laugh so hard that if you were a certain kind of child, you might piddle a bit, or you might get shushed, but in the friendliest possible way by the librarian. And I have found sanctuaries in libraries and bookstores ever since, my whole life. There is sanctuary in libraries. There's sanctuaries in small independent bookstores. I just want to add something quickly, that you really need to buy your books from independent bookstores. Seriously. If you want to get a good seat in heaven, if you want to be anywhere near the dessert table or the cheese, you want to get a book, you want to go to independent bookstores. And I'm a Sunday school teacher, and I know about such things. So, let me read you something I wrote about libraries years ago when Jack Kornfield and I and a few other writers gathered to protest the governor of California, Schwarzenegger's plan to choose the libraries in some of the poorest counties to save money, like Salinas. You all know Salinas. It's Steinbeck. So this is from something or other that I wrote at some point. I don't remember. Okay. A free public library is a revolutionary notion, and when people don't have free access to books, then communities are like radios without batteries. You cut people off from incredible sources of information, mythical, practical, linguistic, or political, and you break them. You render them helpless in the face of political oppression. We were not going to let this happen. We were there to celebrate one intelligence capability that our country can actually be proud of: librarians. I see librarians as healers and magicians. They can tease out of often inarticulate people enough information about what he or she is after to lead him or her on the path of connection. In these isolated and dark and weird days. They're trail guides through the forests of shelves and shelves. You turn a person loose who has limited skills, and they're going to get walloped by all the branches. But librarians match us readers with the right book. Hey, is this one too complicated? Why don't you give me this one a chance? A bunch of normally self-obsessed writer types came together to say to the people of Salinas, we care about your children, your stories, and your freedom. Something has gone so wrong in this country that needs to be fixed, and we care about that. Reading and books are the medicine. Stories are written and told by and for people who have been broken, but who have risen up and will rise up if attention is paid to them. Those people are you and us. Stories and truth are splints for the soul, and that makes today a sacred gathering. Now we were all saying, pass it on. One of the writers with us that day, this is forgot when Schwarzenegger was governor 25 years ago. One of the writers with us was Hector Elizondo, who a lot of you remember from the very early days, with his fabulous wife who had an antique printing press, and he was there. And that's still a good message. Pass it on, you know. Teach anyone to read, you know. Teach someone to read 3 letters. Mother Teresa, who I love, Christopher Hitchens aside, I love her. And she said, none of us can do great things, but all of us can do small things with great love. Hi, Johnny. And you can teach somebody to read a few letters. You know, teach them A-R-C, you know. It spells car, the most important word. Car. You could add an E. E's are good. I mean, at Wordle. So there, now you have care. You know, now you have create. And that's from sitting down with somebody and giving them 4 letters. That's how we pass it on. Good writing, good writing. Good writing to me is like reading scripture, whether it's Barbara Kingsolver or Allen Ginsberg or Ada Limon. Listen to these words. Deep calls unto deep at the noise of your waterfalls. All your waves and billows have gone over me. God will command her loving kindness in the daytime, and in the night her song shall be with me. Right? That's Mary Oliver. Only it's not. It's King David in the Hebrew Bible 3,000 years ago. Deep calling to deep. A waterfall calling to the stars. A tide pool calling to the moon. A little boy calling to his grandfather. Or listen to these lines. Come to the orchard in spring. There is light and wine and love in the pomegranate flowers. Okay, Jane Hirschfield, right? That's Rumi from the 1200s. So you know by the third of your life that most of us know, I think, that success and prestige will not save or fill you for very long, but that great art is offered to us as a conduit or toward revelation, connection, and even glimmers of purity. I mean, that's what's so incredible about Sun Valley is that you turn a corner and there's something new glimmering. You know, there's the glimmer on the waters. There's the minnows underneath, the trout underneath. You turn around and there's the whispering, quivering aspen leaves, you know, that are so tiny and Asian and moved by the spring so that we get to see breath made visible. That is what art reminds us to look for. Books and poems are gorgeous and consistent sources of meaning. It's easy to sense and embrace meaning when things are going well and you're experiencing love and friends and the family's doing okay. The family's put the fun back in dysfunctional, and it's easy to feel that there's meaning in the world, but it's hard to distill meaning when you're navigating around all the sadness and the loss and the disappointment, the terror, if you've ever had a teenager, that we will all inevitably stumble across. And great writing reminds us that no matter how things are looking or how long they're taking, that life holds both answers and mystery, anguish and rebirth, death and new life. Good writing captures all that sustains and fulfills us, and it is delicious. And when you are reading that, last night and tonight when you go to bed, and you are reading something really good, you know what I'm talking about because it's physically delicious to read good writing. And in this swirl of toxic data and overwhelm, it's easy to forget what the point of it all is. You know, when we experience analysis paralysis or interminable depression that we've had all of our lives, or conversely, when we just feel freaked out by how quickly life is racing by in time, like greyhounds at the racetrack, it's easy to lose the focus of our attention and our values. T.S. Eliot wrote, "Where is the life we have lost in living?" And he wrote life with a capital L. Where is the life we've lost in living? It's frightening and disorienting that time skates by so fast. And while that's not as bad as being embedded in the quicksand of loss or loneliness, it can fill you with dread each time another month or year has passed. Although let me remind you of something I love, which is what the actress Kitty Carlisle's mother used to say, which was the great thing about old age was that every 15 minutes it's time for breakfast again. So one can hardly know where to begin the search for meaning, although by necessity and by like everything else, we need to start where we are. We need to start where our butts are. You know the first words that God says to Moses in the Hebrew Bible? I bet some of you do. I know my friend Rob does. He says, take off your shoes, right? Like, be here. Feel the beingness of life in the grass and the earth and the cold stream and the creek, the rocks on your feet in that cold, cold water. Maybe, God willing, there is just the exact right book nearby if you agree to be here and you agree to be present for it, which is not always easy. You know, maybe David Sedaris or James Thurber, and you laugh out loud. And I've said this a million times, and I'm really sorry to my dear husband, Neil. Laughter is carbonated holiness. And when you have felt the darkness of it all, and you all know what I'm talking about, the war and the climate change and the division, the divisiveness, and you laugh out loud, you're halfway home. You're okay again, or at least you're semi-okay, which can be a miracle. Or you pick up Emily Dickinson and you randomly open to a page, and there it is. Hope inspires the good to reveal itself. So you look around. And for Pete's sake, look up. If you don't take anything else away from this talk, keep looking up. You know, you look up from your feet. You look up from all the dirt and the muck and the stuckness. You know, you can trap bees in mason jars without lids on them, with a little drop of honey on the bottom, because they don't look up. You know, they just walk around bumping into the glass bitterly, and all they have to do is look up to fly away. So, you know, look up. Or, you know, somebody foists a book on you, and you go, oh, I'm not going to read that. I've got like 8 books ahead of that. But you accidentally pick it up, and it's Laurie Colwin. And all these years, no one gave you Laurie Colwin. And for that evening, you get to feel that shawl of warmth and familiarity and goodness draped over your shoulders. When we read, our mind turns from the latest nightmare du jour to just understanding and pleasure and enjoyment and mild amazement, often with poets, careful writing. And with that, there's hope. So we go from, look what's happening over there, and I can't do a single thing about it, and all the morbid obsessions and grandiosity we have and the bad self-esteem, and we turn to a fabulous story in which we get lost once again on a new paper ship leaving the shore. And every time it helps me in the madness and suffering in the world, in between or during times of loss or deep bodily confusion, where do we turn? What do we do? Well, my Jesuit friend Tom always reminds me, we do what's possible. I hate that. Okay, fine. What is possible? The practical, the simple, the kind. Pretty much, you know, Mother Teresa, we can't do great things, we can do small things with great love. Simple, practical, kind. We work, love, help each other as best we can, gawk at nature, rest, we pick up litter, and that's pretty much it, right? Realistically. Except we know to turn to the sinners and saints and alchemists of the written word. And their words settle or mobilize us, illuminate the dark corners of the world and of our own souls. Books are lanterns, you know. That little bookstore on the lawn is glowing like a spaceship. Good writing for me is also often an instruction manual. Our fictional heroes try to help where they can, and they have to survive. If there's a decent plot, and I know a lot of you went to Jean's breakout session on plot, if there's a good plot, the fictional heroes have to survive trials and stresses, illnesses, elections, loneliness, and all the existential dread with being here, with being beings who know that at some day every single being that they love here on earth will die. And we wonder, reading about their journey and their coming through, if we might too. If we might be inspired to work harder about not being crazy by it all, by the noise and speed, and to extremely annoying people whose names we are too polite to mention. We see these great characters try not to be tripped up by major global sadness, difficulties in families, the loss of pets. Good writing can spritz us awake like a plant mister to help us try and be more present and less petty. Some days go better than others. Some days are just way too long, and that's just the truth. But whenever you pick up a good book, you're almost instantly okay again, at least for right now, which is all we ever have. It was writers and a few great professors who taught me to believe there's ultimately meaning in the chaos and the doldrums and the drama. Otherwise, it's really tempting, and the culture encourages us to just put a pretty bow on scary things instead of saying, you want the truth? This is a nightmare. I hate everything, and I hate all of life, and my heart is broken to pieces, and nothing is turning out right as I know it wouldn't. But as Carly Simon says, there's more room in a broken heart. And in these great books, we read almost always about a severely broken heart at some point in the book. And then, because we're watching somebody do it, there's a possibility of having the same kind of instructions for if it happens to us. Which, you know what? It's going to. It's just going to. Great writing has so often for me been a kind of midwife through a really dark, scary passage. Sometimes we feel that we're barely pulling ourselves forward through a tight tunnel on our elbows, and we're all scraped up and we can't see any light. So what a blessing it is when a character in a good book is in the same predicament, and they're lost and they're hopeless, but they're so observant, and they're telling you through clear eyes what they think is going on. And maybe they make you laugh, and maybe they make you cry. And the culture does not encourage you to cry, but I do. Because crying will heal you. Crying will hydrate you. It will moisturize you. It will wash you. It will baptize you. And it will water the ground at your feet, where God knows what kind of seeds have been planted there by crazy birds who flew off their flight pattern. So, no matter what happens to us and to our children, to our towns, to our country, to our world, a good writer helps us imagine that there is always the hope of coming through, that no matter what, it's a great gift to have been given a human life. We understand that we and our children are going to get knocked around. It's sometimes so cruel that it takes our breath away, because life can be so hard and weird and confusing. And we are a violent species, and Cain is still killing Abel. And your kids are going to experience, your nieces and nephews out on the blacktop. But when we read about people choosing these paths of good-hearted actions or response and the decent, it gives us a sense of renewal. We can breathe again. If you feel lost and you can't right now and you can't remember the meaning of life, I want to just tell you a couple of books that I think might help you feel really inspired again. Inspired is the intake of breath. Read Tracy Kidder's book about Dr. Paul Farmer. It's called Mountains Beyond Mountains. He was here. Tracy Kidder was here. Ethan and he did an event together. Read Ann Fadiman's book called The Spirit Catches You and You Fall Down. It's about an epileptic child in a Hmong community, and it will change your life. It will help you figure out what you want to do next. Read Catherine Boo, it's B-O-O, her book called Beyond the Beautiful Forever, Families Striving Toward a Better Life, in a place called Annawadi near the Mumbai airport. And these 3 books will change you, and they will make your life so much bigger, and they will thrill you, and you will owe me forever, which is the main thing. So I talked a lot about, there's the guy with the hook right here. So I have 15 minutes. I already talked a lot about writing at the breakout session, but maybe you weren't there. And I just want to spend a few minutes to those tonight who want to write, or whose kids want to write, whose nieces and nephews want to write, whose spouses want to write, or are trying to write, or have been writing and are stuck or uninspired. And everything that I can share with you applies to wherever you are, a rank beginner. If you're older, you can write your memoir. You can write about your childhood. You can write about your years in the Peace Corps, Vista. You can write about first meeting them, first holding them. But wherever you are in the process, like you might not know that you're about to start writing. And I hope I kind of break that for you, and you do. Because being a writer it's like a calling to the monastery for a monk. It means you're going to write a little bit every day. And I can promise you, it's going to go badly. And you're going to have terrible self-esteem. It's going to be a ping-pong game between, by page 3, wondering if this might be an Oprah book, and thinking about what a complete loser you are and how everyone hates you. But don't worry about wanting to be a writer, because there's actually very little actual writing involved. It's really mostly about laundry. You can ask anyone in my family, seriously. Stain removal is my greatest gift. But beside the laundry, you have to do a little bit of writing. And the most important thing is to stop not writing. You know, that's 50% of the problem. Everything that worked to get your kids or nieces or nephews to do anything at all, any work done at all, will help you as a writer, and that means bribes and threats. So I will say, Annie, if you write for 45 minutes, we will stop and we will have a peanut butter sandwich. Or we will watch MSNBC for half an hour. Or we will have a nap. And bribes and threats. You know, and if you get a 45-minute period of time written, you're going to feel completely different about the rest of the day. You're going to feel excited. You're going to feel amazed. So I'm just going to talk about this for one more minute. The best advice I ever heard for writing was 6 words. 7 words. Tell me a story, make me care. That's all you're doing. You know, I don't read books and go, God, that's good writing. I'm not marveling at the choice of words. I'm not trying to figure out, why did you put that here and then drag it out here, and who the hell is that person? I want the same flow of narrative that flows through life with a very clever observer. Somebody I trust, somebody I want to be with for a couple hundred pages, who can see more than I can see and tell me what he or she is seeing. And yeah, I can just love wonderful language. But it has to be in honor of the story. I want coherence and I want truth, because there's so little truth in the popular culture these days. There's so little coherence. Shirley Jackson said, a confused reader is an antagonistic reader. And I am no longer reading complicated books. I am reading books by great writers with a great plot. I just want to talk about 2 really, really quick things. John Gardner said something I love that has been about coherence and continuity. He said that when you're writing, you're creating a dream, and the dream must be continuous. Oh no, now I forgot the quote. Oh well, let's let that go. Okay. But with a dream, you don't stop and go, God, that's weird. I'm shooting heroin with Rosalind Carter. In the dream, you're just kind of going with it, you know? And that's what the writer needs to do. And I want to make a plug. My husband, Neil Allen, wrote a book that is there's a chapter in Bird by Bird called KFKD Radio. I'm not going to say it out loud. but you can spell it out. Radio station KFKD. Then I met this guy who was a wonderful writer, and he does this work with the inner critic that all of us have. You got it as a child. Your parents and the teachers were trying to get you to do things a certain way because they were trying to help you stay alive. And you internalize the voice of this critic because it's saying really good things like don't run out into the street, don't swim there, there's a drop off. But at 20 or 50 or 80, you don't need the inner critic. And it's going to be the hugest block between you and getting any writing done is this voice that you may have been hearing since you were 4 years old. That's going to say, no, don't try that. No, you're too old to start. No, I mean, me with the new book, I was thinking, boy, talk about beating a dead horse, right? But Neil wrote a book, it's called Better Days, and Taming Your Inner Critic. And I learned 8 years ago when we met to start noticing it. I'm not beating a dead horse. I'm just going to write a new batch of stories, No one here has to read them, But, and so I would learn, that voice would start in, oh my God, I wonder if Dwight Garner at the New York Times will like my book, And I would learn to say to it, oh, it's just you. It's not truth. It has nothing to do with whether or not I should be writing or not. The thing is, no one cares if you write, so you better. And I can promise you that when you sit down to write, you're going to hear this critic. So it's called, the book is Better Days, but the work really centers around noticing it. You may have heard it so consistently since you were a little child that you don't even notice it anymore. Start to notice it. Say to it, thank you for keeping me alive when I was little. Why don't you go off to the library? Why don't you go be the ethical consultant for the whole neighborhood? And I am going to try to get 45 minutes worth of work done. Okay. So, in closing-ish. Now what? I'm the last talk. I mostly teach now at this writing collective I plugged of my son's. It's called awritingroom.com, and I get to be the last talk sometimes at their retreats. And always what I want to talk about, because there will have been 3 days, like there have been 3 days here, of brilliant discourse and tips and hints and truth and pleasure on how to write, how to be there for one another. But then, just like you, everyone has to go home. And we won't be there. It's awful. It's a nightmare. It's not right. And we won't be there whether you're at a writing room and we're cheering you on and giving you prompts, or whether you're going home to your homes and all of a sudden real life rears its ugly head. And yeah, you love reading and writing, but you've got a million things to do and you're behind on your homework, as you have been since 3rd grade. So I wanted to just close this with a little bit about now what. Maybe all you need to know when you leave here is the next books you're going to read. Reading and writing, reading is going to save us, as it has since we first broke the code. And we had those 3 words, A-R-E, A-R-C, car, added an E, care, added a T, T's are great, create. And they save us, God. So many of the books we love are by people in impossible circumstances who've been broken like we have been and maybe are right now, and who come through with a modicum of grace and good humor, which are the same thing. I think grace is spiritual WD-40, and it gets in there and it, with that red straw, and it unclenches the situation, whether it's, a doorknob or your heart. And these books give us a more generous heart. We're really moved. And a generous heart is what heaven is like. You know what it's like to go from clenched and gritchy and hustle and strive and try to get closer to these people because they're very powerful, whatever. And instead to feel this strange feeling of warmth and wanting to be there for others. Say, do you need a hand? Do you need a hand? And then you go, oh my God, if you want to have loving feelings instead of clenched and jealous and hustle, do loving things. That's the equation. And so when you leave here, maybe what you can do is to be there for others. because you've been given this astonishing treasure chest on the paper ship of truth, new writers to pursue, children's books you want to buy and pass along. I think that knowing this, that writing will save us, that good books are the way home, is 85% of the problem, 85% of the solution. 15% you're on your own. You do what you do. You help where you can. You pick up litter. You read People magazine. You periodically overeat. You get out of yourself where you can to be there for others. I invented a school of yoga almost 50 years ago called prone yoga, which I really recommend. You mostly just lie on your back, and it's called maintaining the prone. So I recommend that. And another thing is, Ram Dass 50 years ago, right around this time, said, all we're really doing is walking each other home. And how many people here made a new friend? How many people here made a friend that they're going to stay in touch with, right? And we're walking each other home, and the writers who've been guiding me for 66 years have done exactly that for me. That's what we're doing. So find the next book that calls to you. I bet it is in the library. I bet it's in the bookstore right up there. And I really think that it is reason to live. I think being a reader and teaching people to read and this election is about keeping public libraries open. See if you can help. The public schools need you. They need you to come in and read to little kids. So find a way to pass this thing on of being found in the written word, of being blessed by the written word. Maya Angelou said that the function of freedom is to free someone else. So as you go out here, see who needs you. Maybe it is in your family. Maybe it's in a local school, a failing school. You'll know where to go. Any way we can, we help others have the gift of falling into books, being taken somewhere on these paper ships. And that is plenty of meaning for me. So I just want to thank Sun Valley for this retreat and for the 29 years here off and on. I leave here different than I arrived here 4 days ago. I want to leave you with my remaining 3 minutes. With a poem by one of the presenters here from 29 years ago. Her son and my son played together in the grass at Sun Valley. Her name is Naomi Shihab Nye. And I read you this poem because it's about peace and it's about hope and I think it's about truth. It's called Gate A4. Wandering around the Albuquerque airport terminal, after learning my flight had been delayed 4 hours, I heard an announcement. If anyone in the vicinity of Gate A4 understands any Arabic, please come to the gate immediately. Well, one pauses these days. Gate 4 was my own gate, so I went there. An older woman in full traditional Palestinian embroidered dress, just like my grandma wore, was crumpled to the floor, wailing. "Help," said the flight attendant. "Talk to her. What is her problem? We told her the flight was going to be late and she did this." I stooped to put my arm around the woman and speak haltingly. "Shadoa, Shabiduk, Habidi? Stanishwe min fadlik shubitsi siwi?" The minute she heard any word she knew, however poorly used, she stopped crying. She thought the flight had been canceled. She needed to be in El Paso for major medical treatment the next day. I said, "No, we're fine. You'll get there just a bit later." "Who's picking you up?" "Let's call him." We called her son. I spoke with him in English. I told him I would stay with his mother till we got on the plane and ride next to her the whole way. She talked to him. Then we called her other sons just for the fun of it. Then we called my dad, and he and she spoke for a while in Arabic and found out, of course, that they had 10 shared friends. Then I thought, just for the heck of it, why not call some Palestinian poets I know and let them chat with her? This all took 2 hours. She was laughing a lot by then, telling of her life, patting my knee, answering questions. She had pulled a sack of homemade mamoul cookies, little powdered sugar crumbly mounds stuffed with dates and nuts, from her bag, and was offering them to all the women at the gate. To my amazement, not a single woman declined one. It was like a sacrament. The traveler from Argentina, the mom from California, the lovely woman from Laredo, we were all covered with the same powdered sugar and smiling. There is no better cookie. And then the airline broke out free apple juice from huge coolers, and 2 little girls from our flight ran around serving it, and they were covered with powdered sugar too. And I noticed my new best friend, by now we were holding hands, had a potted plant poking out of her bag, some medicinal thing with green furry leaves. Such an old country tradition. Always carry a plant. Always stay rooted to somewhere. And I looked around that gate of late and weary ones, and I thought, this is the world I want to live in, the shared world. Not a single person in that gate, once the crying of confusion stopped, seemed apprehensive about any other person. They took the cookies. I wanted to hug all those other women too. This can still happen anywhere. Not everything is lost. Amen. And thank you so, so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to Annie. Please join us for a glass of wine out by the bookstore tent. Our dates, they're not up there yet. Annie's going to sign books in the book signing tent if you would like that. And then our dates for next year are the July 19th to the 21st. Thank you. You've been wonderful. I don't even know if I have those dates.